In this video, we are going to learn how to import your models from Maya into Unreal Engine 5. Before exporting our models from Maya, I just want to make sure that I have my Unreal project organized. I'm going to go to a project that I created, and let's take a look at what we have here. So we have a section for content, and we have our starter content. I don't really want to touch the starter content because this is what Unreal gives us by default. So I'm going to create my own folder in the content section. You can also create it up here, but I just created in the content just to make sure that everything remains within this folder. If you don't see this box that I have here, you can access it by clicking on Content Drawer on the left. So this opens and closes this box. I'm just going to open out content and right click here to create a new folder. And I'm going to call this, let's say, living room scene. Your naming for Unreal cannot have spaces, so either use underscores or just use uppercase letters for the names. So I have living room scene, and in here, I'm just going to create 3 folders. So my first folder is going to be my props. You can call this anything you want. It can be props or meshes or models. My next folder is going to be materials. And I'm going to right click again to create a new folder that is called textures. This is pretty self-explanatory. This folder is going to contain our models. This folder is going to contain our materials. And this folder is going to contain all of our texture maps. Now let's go back to Maya and see how to export our model. When you're exporting your models from Maya into Unreal Engine, in an ideal situation, you would want to export all your assets as individual models and not as an entire scene. We will also look at how to export an entire scene if you have that set up in Maya. But if you're following an ideal workflow, this is what you would do. You would have your individual asset. This can be one piece like I have here, or it can be multiple pieces, but you'd have your asset at the center of the Maya window, and you would have it scaled to a real world size. If you don't know how big your object is, you can use create, measure tools, and the distance tool to measure the length of your object. But this needs to be real world size, center of the Maya window. It also should have a material assigned to it. It does not matter which material it is. It could be any material type. It could be a Lambert or an AI standard surface or anything else. But just make sure that your material is named something identifiable. I like to name it with the prefix M and followed by the name of what my object is. And this material does not have any texture maps assigned to it. It's just the default material. We will be importing and assigning our texture maps inside Unreal Engine. And another thing to check, which should already be the case if you haven't changed your Maya defaults, is your scene units. So if you go to Windows, Settings and Preferences, and then go to Settings, you'll be able to check that your scene units are set to centimeters. This is important because Unreal uses centimeters, and if this is set to something else, you might get unexpected scaling results within Unreal Engine. Once you check that, just do all the regular model cleanup steps, which is delete history, freeze transforms. In most cases, you would also do a center pivot, but in the case of an export to Unreal, your pivot here doesn't really matter because wherever your pivot is in Maya, Unreal is just going to send it all the way to the origin. Once you have all of this set up, you can go to File and Export Selection to export your model. I'm just doing a regular FBX export. I export selection, and I'm going to export this into my scenes. A very important setting in your FBX export is your smoothing groups. You can find this in, if none of this is opened up, you can find this in file type specific options. Go to include, and in the geometry section, you will see smoothing groups. This is turned off by default, I believe. So if it is turned off, just make sure you turn it on and then choose a file name. I'm going to call this SM. So SM stands for static mesh in Unreal Engine. That's just what any model that doesn't have a rig is called. So SM underscore Gothic table. Whatever naming convention you use, just make sure to keep it consistent and export selection. And now let's see what that looks like when you import it into Unreal Engine. I have my test project here. I'm just going to import my model into this project. I opened up my file explorer with my Maya scenes where I exported my Gothic table. You can see that it's here and it's an FBX file. I'm just going to drag this over to my content drawer. You have some FBX import options. I can leave most of this at the default. I just want to go into advanced and make sure combine meshes is turned off. This is just something I usually turn off in Unreal because we've already combined the meshes that we want to combine in Maya, and we don't really need to have this on. This is especially important if you're importing entire scenes. So combine meshes is turned off. Everything else is good at the default, and then you hit import all. Once you do that, you get two items in here because we didn't have texture maps assigned. You get your Gothic table and you get your material. I am just going to take my table into the props section and select move here. And I'm just going to drag and drop this into the material section and click on move here. This is just keeping everything organized. Now, let's look at exporting an entire scene into Unreal Engine. A lot of the elements that we discussed for individual models remain the same, but you have some other considerations to take into account. The first thing is you do not want to have duplicates of the same model within your file, like this chair right here, and this is the exact same chair, just copies of it. You do not want that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to delete these copies. And these files are all referenced in. You can see that because of this little diamond right here. So I'm going to select these two references, right click, and remove. I'm going to hit remove. And now I have just one version of every file in the scene. And the next thing is you want to import all your references into this file. Before you do any of this, it's always a good idea to save a copy of your file by going to File, Save Scene As, or Increment and Save, because once you get rid of these references, you're not going to be able to bring them back. So always save a copy. And once you do that, just let's select all these references, right click, reference, and import. Once you import it, another thing about references is that it gives you this prefix in front of your name, which you don't want. So I'm going to just merge all my namespaces. If you don't know what this is, it basically gets rid of all these prefixes that are added due to referencing, and you get cleaner names. You can do this by going to Windows, General Editors, and going to the namespace editor, which is here. Select all these prefixes. You can see how they correlate to what you have here. Select all of them and hit delete. And just select merge with root when this pop-up comes up. And now it's deleted all those prefixes in front of your names. The next thing is same considerations for your models. I want this chair to be a single object, so I'm going to combine it. And I'm just going to combine everything, delete the history, and I'll continue the video from there. Okay, I have combined all my meshes, deleted history, frozen transformations. Let me make sure I've done that. So all my transforms are at 0, 0, 0 and 1, 1, 1. The only thing I haven't combined here in terms of assets is these doors. I do want to move them separately, so I've not combined them. And everything else has been combined for Unreal Engine. So I'm just going to export this as normal. Just a reminder to make sure that smoothing groups is turned on in your FBX export options. Inside Unreal Engine, I'm just going to bring in my living room scene into my content drawer. Here's my file explorer with my Maya project, and I'm just going to drag this in. Combined meshes is turned off. We do not want our entire scene to be a single mesh. And I'm just going to leave everything else at the default and hit import all. It took a few seconds, but it imported my entire scene. It just brings up these message logs and this pop-up. I can close this out. Let's go to my content drawer and see what it brought in. It brought in whatever my materials were named. Some of them were not named very well, so I might need to rename them here. I can right-click and rename anything within this file, but it brought in my materials, and it brought in all my objects. And if I select all these objects, so anything that is named static mesh, let's say this is my entire room, I can just drag this into my Unreal Engine window. And we have all our objects in the exact same position they were in within Maya. I'm going to hide this floor by hitting H on my keyboard. One thing to take into consideration when you are importing an entire scene is that all your pivot points are now going to be at the origin. You can move this in Unreal, but by default, it's all going to be at the origin. If you want your scene to be in the exact same location it was within Maya, you can select all of these objects and you can go into details and change your location options to 0, 0, and 0. Now, for the last part of this video, we'll take a look at how to move these pivot points in Unreal Engine if you are importing your entire scene. To edit the pivot point of any object, you need to change the mode that you are on. By default, your objects are on selection mode. You can change this by going to the top left to this drop down and changing this to modeling. When you do that, you can select any object. Let's go with this one and go into the X form section. In this section, you have an option called Edit Pivot, and you can just place the pivot where you want it to be. I can say center, bottom, top, wherever I want it to be. So I'm going to say center, and I'm going to hit Accept down here, and now your pivot has been changed. If you want to move your pivot to a very specific location, like for this door, select that door, go to Edit Pivot, and I am going to enable snap dragging. I'm going to start off with putting it at the center, and then I'm going to drag it over. So this is sort of where the door hinge should open from. So I'm going to position it here, and I'm going to accept that. And now your door also opens exactly from the hinges. One thing to take into consideration when you are moving the pivot of your object in Unreal is that it now changes your location. So earlier, when you had this file set up, your default location for this object was at, this was 0, 0, 0. You'll notice that that's for all these objects. But since we changed this pivot, your default location has now changed. So if I change this to 0, 0, and 0, this is now going to go to the Unreal Engine origin. This is just something to keep in mind.